Unlike any review I've done before, this video is not only going to go over simply what I liked and didn't like about this monitor, but also go in depth on its functionality and features. If you have any questions about the monitor, please leave them down below and I'll address them as best I can. On screen right now are the timecodes to the different sections of this video, but these will also be listed in the description as well as in a pinned comment. For full transparency, this product was sent to me by ESDDI for an overall reduced price, and they've asked me to give as comprehensive a look as possible at the monitor. With that being said, all opinions, recommendations, and thoughts are entirely my own, and without any further ado, let's get on with the video. For this section of the video, I'm simply going to go through a rapid fire of what I liked and didn't like about the monitor. Starting with the unboxing, it's once again nice, and the completeness of the accessories included is great to see. I do wish it came with a DC adapter in the box, and perhaps a full-size HDMI cable. However, for both, I was able to use a spare that I had lying around. Moving on to the battery. On a full charge of the bundled battery, I got 2.5 hours of average to intense screen-on usage, which is entirely usable. However, I laid the blame for this much more on the battery included than the monitor. If you were to strap a much bigger NPF 970 battery, then I'm sure it would power you all day. And I wouldn't even worry about it popping off or falling out, as the battery lock on the back is perfectly secure. Which leaves me with my one and only tiny gripe, and that is that the battery percentage displayed for the monitor only moves down in 20% increments, and I often had the monitor shoved to just a backlight after it had been showing 40% for a while. One thing to note is that this indicator on screen cannot be turned off, and in my case, it did manage to block my camera's battery level, which I find to be more important almost all of the time. Moving around the monitor, we get all our ports as well as a mounting point, both of which I found to be nice and secure. The only problem I had with the former was the unfortunate audio performance that added a significant amount of hiss and removed a lot of the bass that would otherwise have been there. Better than nothing, but I never used it extensively. And as far as the latter, I found the mounting point and brackets to be very sturdy and functional, and when they did become loose, they were very easy to tighten again. The top of the unit houses all the controls for the monitor, and although a bit cumbersome to use, are not impossible to learn, and the feel of the buttons was acceptable. As far as the menus and functions themselves, I will get into these a lot more in the second part of this video. However, as a whole, I was surprised by the completeness of the options, and it has practically everything that I would want for a standard field monitor. With the only two notable things it lacks being 2:1 crop marks and the ability to have focus and exposure peaking running simultaneously. Which brings me on to the actual panel and display of this monitor. Frankly, I'm impressed. Having a 1080p resolution at 5 inches makes for an incredibly sharp screen that also packs a punch with a fantastic and bright backlight that I measured to hit up to 320 nit sustained brightness, and that was easily viewable outdoors, both in shade or in direct sunlight. However, expect to get some pretty intense reflections from the glossy screen, something that I honestly don't mind most of the time, but is something worth mentioning nonetheless. However, the small included sunshade does help to alleviate some of these issues. And as far as color reproduction on this display, although I don't have the tools to measure delta E values, I did measure the panel for having 100% coverage of sRGB, which is perfect for digital applications, with the monitor also having 87% and 85% of the Adobe RGB and NTSC color spaces respectively. Subjectively, you will probably need to spend a couple minutes with it hooked up to a PC messing around with the display settings to manually get it closer to calibrated, as it certainly wasn't out of the box. But once you've done that, the colors and reproduction on the IPS display are great, bright, and saturated. The overall build quality for the monitor is sturdy for being all hard plastic, and it easily withstood the usual bumps, hits, and falls a piece of working film equipment would have to, especially in the hands of less trained individuals. The monitor, without a battery or bracket, comes in at just 150 grams, which is good and light to easily add to a camera rig. I do wonder, however, if they could have put slightly more weight in the monitor as a form of a better heatsink, as this monitor gets very hot in use. The back of the monitor gets warm enough to be unpleasant to hold, meanwhile the front I simply just wouldn't want to touch. If mounted somewhere, as I would highly recommend this monitor would be, it's perfectly fine. However, if you're trying to hold this in your hands on a 30-degree day, good luck. And lastly, on a completely different note, I would like to mention just how helpful and considerate ESDDI support has been to me. The first unit I received of this monitor and used for about a month unfortunately suffered an unsurvivable fall, hitting a light stand on the way down. A fall that I honestly doubt any non-ruggedized field monitor could have withstood. However, graciously, ESDDI was able to send a replacement monitor to me incredibly quickly so that I could finish up shooting this review to be posted. And this is on top of them being very willing and open to answer any questions I had for them regarding this monitor. But before I get to the conclusion of this video, I would first like to go over the features and more nitty-gritty stuff about this monitor. If you wish to skip to my conclusion right now, you can do so by seeing the timecode on screen right now, or of course in the description and pinned comment. Starting once again with the unboxing. Inside the box includes the monitor itself, the mounting bracket, a small Velcro sunshade, an SD branded 2200 mAh MPF 550 battery, an SD branded MPF charger, a mini USB cable, and two HDMI cables, one micro to full and the other mini to full. Moving on to the physical layout of the monitor. The back has a combo battery plate for both either a Sony MPF style battery or a Canon LPE6. And above is a quick release button for the batteries, which are otherwise locked in place when fully inserted. On the bottom, there is a DC 8.4 volt output jack for powering a camera or other device. And to the right of that, a 3.5mm headphone jack and a mini USB port for firmware updates only. This port is not designed for power in or out in any way. On the left side of the device, we continue with our ports. Two full-size HDMIs, one for taking in a signal and the other for passing through that signal to another device. And finally, the DC input jack, which I have been told from SD has a spec of 12 volt, 1 to 3 amps, with an outer diameter of 5.5mm and an inner diameter of 2.1mm. On the opposing side is where the 1/4-20 mounting screw comes pre-installed, but undoing two Phillips head screws allows for it to be mounted to the bottom of the monitor instead. The arm that comes in the box for the monitor attaches to this point and includes a cold shoe plate as well as a female 1/4-20 for mounting. And on the side, a cold shoe mount and another female 1/4-20 for expandability. This arm can also double as a small stand for the monitor to be placed on a table, and the hex thumb screw allows for easy and quick adjustments. And finally, on the top of the monitor is where one will find all the buttons on this monitor, all labeled. From left to right, the buttons are Function 1, Function 2, Left, Right, Menu, Down, Up, and Power, and are all the controls for the menus and options inside of the monitor. Speaking of which, let's take a deep dive into the many features of this Field Monitor. Pressing the menu button brings up the settings menu, which is split into 5 tabs: Picture, Settings, Zoom and Resolution, and Features and Overlays, with the last tab being for custom functions. To go up one menu tier, simply press the menu button, and navigation is simply a combination of the left, right, up, and down buttons. The picture settings include everything to control the monitor's color and picture. There are a series of preset modes, as well as a user mode which allows for manual adjustments, with below coarse and fine adjustments for the color temperature of the display. And finally, you can adjust tint at the bottom of the second page. The Settings tab allows you to set the backlight brightness and language, as well as settings for the menus, power on behaviors, no signal behaviors, aspect ratio controls, and it's where you'll upgrade the firmware as well as reset to factory settings. The zoom settings give you controls for general zoom amounts, but also further customizability, with control for the horizontal and vertical zoom separately, with at the bottom of the screen a selection for underscan or overscan. Which brings us to the features and overlays, and there is a lot. In order of how they appear in the menu, there is a toggle for a center crosshair, options for safety guides at varying percents, a toggle for the thirds grid, a toggle to freeze the current frame on screen, options for mirroring the image, flipping the image, or doing both, a separate option to toggle whether or not the menus and overlays flip with the image, varying options for anamorphic desqueezing, as well as a user option which allows user control from 1.2 to 2x. There are options for seeing just the luma, red, green, or blue channels, a toggle for the on-screen histogram, a toggle for false colors, focus assist, changing the peaking color of Focus Assistant, an exposure peaking toggle, exposure peaking sensitivity from 1 to 100 IRE, a toggle for visual audio monitoring, crop marks of 235, 185, 14, 15, and 16:9, as well as 4:3. And finally, there's a color selection for the on-screen markers, width selection for the on-screen markers, and finally, a setting I couldn't figure out. The last tab allows you to assign what functions you want to be programmed to the 2 custom function buttons. Pretty self-explanatory, and most of the features and options are there. For a little mini review on the functions of the monitor, I am beyond impressed, especially with the sheer number and variety of features included, and some less common ones, such as anamorphic desqueezing. But I do have a few things for them to add if they ever decide to push a firmware update. These things include options for different crosshairs, such as a dot or crosshair without the center part. Also, options for dialing into the percent safety markers would be good for seeing more specific crops in post on set. And it would be great if there were different sensitivity levels for the focus peaking, if it were even possible to implement. I would like to say that all of these things are completely nice to haves and not at all need to haves. So in conclusion, I love this monitor. It comes with everything most people would need right in the box. The screen itself is super sharp, super bright, and includes basically every feature one would want. So if you are a DSLR or mirrorless camera shooter, then you quite frankly need one of these for its portable size, lightweight, and really low cost for coming under $170 US. And if one is used to using a small 3 or 3.5 inch screen, the difference to moving up to 5 inches will be incredible and will definitely show in your end result. Because as a cinematographer, I don't know how I would live without all of the features that field monitors like this provide. And even in my use case, where the camera already has all the features this monitor brings, the ability to have a live view and screen anywhere in a small package is an absolute lifesaver. And frankly, most of the time, I prefer to use this monitor over my 7-inch Field World because of that, as well as this monitor's fantastic panel. And even when compared directly to its competition, this monitor simply provides more value in the form of what you get in the box as well as the great support from ESDDI themselves. This monitor is one that I can 100% recommend, and also one that I will continue to use all the time, and has earned itself a permanent place in my go-to production gear kit. A second for this YouTube channel. Good job, ESDDI.